really want to say is how grateful Rick, the pastor of the church, is to this committee. I eventually was led to develop a relationship with Mary Ann Greenhall, and through her I got to meet her daughter Mary Faith. And it's a very important thing that this church now has a living relationship with the Greenhall family, and that this committee, which is all formed by people who have a deep connection with the garden, that this committee exists. I do want to say that when you get into church work, sometimes the committees are where really exciting stuff happens, and sometimes not so much. This committee has been one of the most efficient and hardworking groups I've ever worked with in my entire life. I mean, dating back to high school memories when we thought we were changing the world. This committee has met 10 times in 16 months since we started, which is roughly every 7 weeks. Met very faithfully. The attendance has been great. But what really matters is that everyone on this committee has taken jobs and tasks, and they have always come back to the next meeting having completed those tasks. So we have accomplished a lot. We have started the publicity campaign by getting some information into the newsletter semi-regularly. We did a mailing to help raise money, and this is one of the most important things this committee has done. And Mary Faith didn't say this, but I want you to know this. When they started this garden, they threw a lot of their own money into the garden. And the Greenhall family has continued to help support the garden. Not only have they supported the garden financially, but they, being Mary Ann and then Mary Faith, have tended the garden and taken care of the grass and the weeding and the trimming of the bushes. And we're talking back to 1992. Well, eventually, Mary Ann gets older and she can't do that. Mary Faith's hanging in there doing some of it herself. And then she starts to hire it out and have some other people come in and help. But the real issue was that we had to figure out how to keep this garden self-perpetuating. Because we promised that when we were buried there that we'll take care of the grass, forever and ever, as the Bible says. And to do that, we have done a fundraising campaign, and letters were mailed out to everybody who has a relative, friend in that garden. And we did raise some money there, so we have some more money in the bank. The price was raised from $395 to be buried there to $500, which is not much of a price raised, but that's what it is currently. And we've worked very, very hard to try to ensure that this garden will continue. And one of the goals is not to have the South Church have to take over paying for the garden in any way. And so far we've managed to keep that plan, which was the original intention. So I share that with you because, these financial details are a very important part of what's going on here with this committee and with the South Church. We have greatly improved the ways we contact and keep contact with families who have members there. We have new spreadsheets and databases with all sorts of information. When somebody is buried there, we update the information so we can really stay in touch with folks who are there, and they know that we are still here and caring for the garden. We have a landscaper who works on the church property and works across the street from me and Angela, and that company is now taking care of trimming the bushes, cutting the grass, replacing the myrtle when someone is interred there. We have created operating guidelines. And I know some people in South Church really do like details and like to read. If anyone wants to see operating guidelines for the South Church garden, this has been recently minted. This is one of the major projects. We look at gardens all around the country we had connections with, members of the committee had connections with, and saw how they created an operating guideline, procedures and rules and practices. And we modeled ours on theirs with the very specific things that are unique to the South Church situation. So I'm very proud of the committee for coming up with this, because it answers questions, it gives us direction. One of the things that's important in there is that we've discovered it would be really nice to encourage people to buy and earn when you place somebody in the garden. Sometimes people are moved, as you heard Rob refer to this morning. People may move from this cemetery to that cemetery, from this garden to that garden, from the mantle to the garden, from the garden to somewhere else. And you really can't do that without an urn. So it's not a requirement, but it's now a very strong suggestion that people be buried in an urn, if possible, when they are interred in the garden. We also have contingencies in case anything would ever happen to the church. And like it or not, it's one of those things you have to talk about and think about. And we have a very clear, set of procedures for if something were to happen to the South Church, what would happen to the garden. We've thought that through. We've made as many provisions as we can possibly legally, realistically make. And we promised that, you know, we're really going to try to take care of that garden in any way possible, in every way possible. All of these things are spelled out in here, and you might want to read them. So there's like 10 copies of this available, and I can print more in a moment's notice. That's the gist of what I really wanted to share. One of the other things, I came here, we had this old map sitting around the corner of the office, and one day I think it was Deborah and I said, well, we ought to put that map on the wall. So we put that map on the wall, and it was a map of the garden and the plots and where people are buried. This is a very important thing to keep track of. And I was really grateful one day to find out that Mary Ann had perfect records, because at that point, the South Church did not have particularly perfect records of where everybody was or who was reserved. It was kind of messy. I won't go into the details, but it was a great relief that we finally got to the bottom of that. We now have spreadsheets, we have pictures, we have backup, and we have a committee. That's real progress. The image of the garden is not symmetrical, and there is no direct, you know, counterpoint between, or connection between the plaques in the garden that have people's names and where they're actually buried in the earth. If you are buried there, you get a plaque with your name on it, but the plaques, the rectangular pieces, do not mirror the space in the ground. So we have to have a separate way of keeping track of where people are, what plots are reserved, and that's all making perfect sense now. And in that process, we decided it would be really nice to have a new map. And I'd like Amy Mick, who took that job on, and I have no idea how many hours she had to spend making this happen, but there was many. And Amy, would you please say a few words about the map?
Good morning, everyone. I promise to keep this brief. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Amy Mick, and I'm happy to be here as part of this committee. I joined this committee because it does hold a special place in our family's hearts, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm sure that many of you have visited the garden, but those of you that have not, please step in. It really is a lovely, serene spot. When you do step into the garden, you'll see that it's divided into 4 quadrants, as this map here shows. Currently, we are utilizing 2 of those quadrants, the southeast and northeast sections of the garden. There are placards there, as Rick has mentioned, a stand with the name placards on it. And those represent the family members that are interred in the garden. We are currently only using those 2 sections because that's where we have the placard. And the other sections will become available as a new placard was purchased or donated. On the sketch, you'll see that they're all numbered, and those are where the plots are. And we do have a key for those if you were looking to know exactly where a family member is interred. Nearly 60 of our plots have been utilized so far, either interred with ashes or reserved, and there are many more still available in those quadrants. This map does not detail what has been reserved, but we do have a working copy, so to speak, that shows us where you could choose a spot. When you visit the garden, you'll notice that the nameplates don't really match up with the plots, but we have made every effort to keep family members' names near each other, and we'll continue to work with the most appropriate location for your nameplate to be placed. I do have, sorry. I do have this working copy available. You can see the blue sections are the plots that have already been reserved or are currently being utilized by family members. We really hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit about our committee today, and that you do take a chance to step into the garden. It's a beautiful, serene spot to visit, even if you don't have a personal connection. It really is a lovely spot to visit. And take a look at our map when you get a chance, and our brochure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. That pretty much concludes our talk. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you're perhaps curious. There are policy guidelines here if you'd like a copy of that. There's information about the garden on the website. There's a new brochure. Please take that with you if you want it. We have extras. There will always be some copies here available at the church. We are always accepting donations to the garden. If you feel so moved that you'd like to dedicate some money to that cause, we can do so, and we will accept that money.